June 15th, 2022. Well, I want to address this ongoing legislation that's kind of working its way into Congress. It's about the Cornyn, what's generally called a gun control effort, although I think that's a mischaracterization of what it is mostly. I know it's led to a lot of people referring to these people as traitors and all this, and it does seem like there's a lot of, let's say, concern about misperception here. But I'll get into that in a little bit. First, I want to mention that YouTube has decided to declare one of my previous videos to be misinformation and removed it. It's the one that addressed issues in the last presidential election. And by the way, if anybody wants to still see it, you can go to my Rumble account, which I do put links to my Rumble account below, where I post all of my videos as well here. Well, all the more recent ones. I think there was a period of time where I didn't do it, so not everything in the YouTube list is on there, but certainly all the recent ones are. So at any rate, but let's get on to this gun issue, as we call it, which was started by this Uvalde shooting and led to whatever. Basically, my general opinion is quite the contrary to what a lot of people are thinking. I think the Democrats are getting rolled here big time. I think it's a big win for our side, for the most part, with the possible exception of those that have gotten convicted for abusing a dating partner, or maybe somebody who's running a gun business without a federal firearms license. I think that those two groups might be kind of impacted in a way, but I think otherwise, I think everybody else is kind of comes out on top here. By the way, the first thing to point about these proposed legislation is it does not ban any firearm type that isn't already in that situation. Every firearm that can currently be legally purchased can still be legally purchased. Every magazine type that previously could be legally purchased can still be legally purchased. Now, this doesn't go to what's going on in certain states right now, and that's a different issue. But we're talking about the federal legislation doesn't do any of that. So I think that's the key thing to consider. And remember that the Democrats have passed two bills that ban all sorts of things on the House side. So there is a real threat that we're dealing with here. And I think we're also doing this in an election year, and we have a situation where the media has ginned up a lot of misinformation. Speaking about misinformation, that's confused a bunch of people to answer questions, which gives some people the opinion that they want certain measures passed that they probably really don't want if they were able to think about it. By the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like. If you like this content, subscribe to my channel, and you can click the bell for notifications. And like I say, you also look at the description below, and you can also follow me on Rumble. Yeah, so my thinking is that the primary thrust of this, and I think the primary objection is the red flag law issue. And that's why I think the devil's in the real details here, and we're still, until the text is actually written, we can't say for sure what our real opinion on this is. I mean, I could turn around and oppose it if the wrong things are in it. I'm kind of hopeful that maybe it will rein in some of the more red flag bills that have already been passed because of knee-jerk reactions. And there's another thing that must be considered on red flag. There is a Supreme Court case from last year. I think it's Carnegie versus Strom, and it seems to have had a unanimous overturn of a lower court ruling about a red flag case. Now, I think it also should be pointed out that it does not completely eviscerate all red flag laws or say they can't be done, but what it may be is a beginning of a set of precedents that might rein them in and focus them in a more fair way. And in a previous video, I went through what I thought would be acceptable in that area. The main point being that I don't think it should be a one-sided procedure. And I had the concept that if you were to have such a rule, that a court-appointed attorney should be should exist prior to a decision being ruled that would represent the person that's being accused or being red flagged, and would investigate this, would investigate the claims that the person that's making the charge to try to get this happen, and maybe look at other witnesses to see if there's any basis for doing this. I mean, um, the problem with this is obviously is that, and the reason why it's kind of conducted the way it's done surreptitiously is that, well, if there really is a real reason to do it, the very fact that the action's being taken in court may trigger the person to act before the police can act. And so that's one reason why it's done that way. But it also seems to violate due process, which is the objection on the other side. But anyway, that's that aspect of it. But let's look at what else is in this thing. I think basically it focuses on things like school safety, which is something that the Democrats seem to be opposed, apparently because the safety procedures might cause some concern on the part of students who presumably are already concerned because of the events they hear about in the media. So that seems to be kind of nonsense. I mean, a lot of things Democrats say are kind of nonsense, really. But okay. But it seems school safety is the key thing. I mean, for instance, if a door had been locked at Uvalde, the whole thing probably would have never happened. There probably would have been a confrontation between police and an armed person outside the school, but probably nobody inside the school been harmed. But unfortunately, the police somehow allowed this guy to get into school, partly because the door wasn't secured. So school safety, even more modest methods, can actually be a very protective thing. And that's in their funds to do that. There's also the red flag provisions. And this doesn't pose a national red flag. It basically kind of presents a situation that funds red flag efforts at the state level. And that's where I think we need to see what the text is before we make a final opinion on that. Otherwise, there's this boyfriend loophole thing, they call it, which basically is that there are a lot of abuses of mainly female partners, but in this world of today, I guess it could be any kind of partner. But the point is, but at any rate, it could be that this person has abused somebody, but they're not married and they're not living together and they don't have a mutual child, etc. And therefore, under the current law, that misdemeanor conviction provision doesn't apply. Now, I personally don't like the idea of lifetime bans based on misdemeanor convictions. But nonetheless, if you're going to have that, it would make sense it should occur to people that are not necessarily cohabiting, but still actually had a situation that was abusive enough that led to a criminal conviction. So as much as somebody that was actually cohabiting that would lead to it. Okay, so I don't think that's a big loss. If somebody does, well, that's life in this situation, I guess. Again, I have some issues with the general idea, and my main problem isn't a short-term prohibition, like for 5 years or something, but the idea of it being lifetime, when the relationship that led to this has long since been over with. They may not even be living in the same state anymore. Why a lifetime? I think that's something I have a problem with. But other than that, when you get into the situation, otherwise, the big issue is not where the Democrats want to ban people under 21 from having any kind of firearm, even I guess a basic .22 rifle, or at least certain classes of rifle, which would force us to demonize certain weapons like they like to do to eventually promote the argument for their ultimate ban, which is what they're really trying to do. This avoids this totally and focuses on the idea of background checks for firearms from 18 to 20-year-olds, and apparently they're going to include the juvenile records. That doesn't seem to be a big problem to me. I mean, after all, if they have a serious juvenile offense that, if treated as an adult, would have caused them to be banned, all of a sudden, as a juvenile, they turn 18 and that's all ignored, even though they did the thing just a few months ago, and they are having serious trouble. The other focus is on mental health, I guess particularly for the youth, and that probably is a problem right now. I don't know, again, how effective that'll be, I don't know, but, it's in there. And there are some issues on straw purchases, which are, of course, one of the biggest sources of firearms in the hands of criminals anyhow. And so that's that's in there. And there is something about, which is kind of going, I think, to the idea of what I call a gray area seller. And again, I haven't seen the final text on that. But what I call a gray area seller is somebody who doesn't have a federal firearms license, who is selling firearms to people on a more routine basis, not just that they have a gun that they don't want anymore and they want to get the money to buy something else, regardless of what it might be, and so they have a buddy that they sell it to. Not that sort of thing, but a person that's on a routine basis. I think that may be involved here. That I've not seen the text of either. It's because, this whole, but it doesn't get into the whole idea of universal background checks, which means that you can't sell to your uncle or to your best friend or something without going through an FFL transfer, which I think was a little bit excessive. And also, a lot of people fear this is a backdoor form of registration, which is half true, I guess. It's not an efficient form of registration, but it is definitely kind of a backdoor way to get that could be used that way. It would have logistical problems. That is, they'd have to go to the person keeping the 4473 forms at the particular dealership or gun store and then actually pull the forms and go through them to get the specific case, which isn't the same thing as having a computerized database. Now, the other side is there are allegations that the background check requests themselves are being stored when they shouldn't be. And that's another issue, but that doesn't let them know what particular firearm was involved or anything like its serial number. That, again, would require legwork, which is too inefficient to be the threat that's sometimes meant to be. But it's there. At any rate, those are all kind of the basic items that are in there. And I don't see this as being at all what the Bloomberg people want to do, for instance, at all. This is a very limited measure. It gets around the charge of not doing anything. Actually, it may be doing something helpful, particularly the school protection measures. I think that is probably the most useful thing that can be done about all this. And there's nothing wrong with kind of doing a little bit of excessive background check for people that are coming out of the juvenile system and going into the adult system to see if there's anything in the recent juvenile system that might be a big warning, like people that have a tendency to, brutalize animals and stuff. I mean, that seems to be a kind of a leading indicator of the kind of people that end up doing nutty actions as adults. And so, but anyhow, anyway, I just thought I'd kind of go through that. And I think that people should be a little careful here. At the present time, it seems like, though, that we do have the Republicans highly intimidated in that they mostly got people that are not up for any recent election, people that are not running for re-election, or people that are already on the bad list anyhow, or pretty much on the of the 10 people involved at the point of the original agreement. So we'll have to keep an eye on this one. And by the way, it's always useful to contact your senators and Congress people, let them know what you think. And particularly the NRA-ILA has a thing right now suggesting people contact to oppose those House bills. I'm pretty sure they're not going to pass, but at the same time, it's good to let everybody know you don't want them to pass so they don't change their mind in the future. Keeping the pressure up in a reasonable way is a good thing, but I think we should also be thoughtful of what we're doing and the problems we're avoiding. So, at any rate, that's kind of what I have. By the way, in the description below, I have my list of social media sites. You can follow me on Twitter, particularly. I'm getting a few new followers there, and I'm glad to see that. I hope we get more. And all the other ones, Gab is if you're not on that, that's kind of a more right-wingish site, but I think I get more favorable responses there than I do anywhere else. So, and they're good people. They maybe have a little bit of well, they're the people that don't trust the authority very much. Let's put it that way. Of course, Parler and Gettr and the Trump, social media. So, at any rate, I'll wrap this one up for now, and until next time.